please explain in greater detail what a CBDC is? And as far as I understand, it's not really a currency, but it's a completely different financial transaction system, right?
Right. So CBDCs are not currencies. A CBDC system is a complete control system. So if they don't want you shopping more than 5 miles from your home, you can't shop with your digital money from the central bank more than 5 miles from your home. If they don't want you buying chocolate, you can't buy chocolate. If they don't want you spending money on Thursday, you can't. If they want to if they decide to double your taxes and just take it out of your account, they can. And if you don't do what they say, they can shut off your money. They can freeze your account. In fact, the controller of the currency nominee in the first year of the Biden administration literally proposed in an article for Vanderbilt that the beautiful thing about having CBDCs is if you were worried about inflation, you just freeze everybody's bank accounts. They can't spend money. So again, this is a complete control system. It's not just a complete financial control system. It's a complete control system. We know, and they've said, that they want to install chips in human beings. We see Elon Musk talking about putting a chip in the back of your head as though somehow that's a fashionable idea. And once you get CBDCs with an authentication system, or whether it's a digital ID or vaccine passport, once you get those things, we're talking about reducing the human race to a slavery system. And, whatever liberties we've enjoyed in the West or in the United States, they're over. The central banks will have complete central control. So now here's the problem. If they push for complete total control, total control where you're a slave and you're chipped and you have to do everything they say, people will literally say, let's get rid of the central banks. And we have the power still to do that. So the question is, how do you persuade all the, think of this as a herd of cattle. How do you persuade the cattle to stay in the control grid? You've put up 3 sides of the corral. How do you snap that last part of the corral in place with CBDCs and vaccine passports without them, stampeding out of the corral? So how do you keep them sort of dumb and happy as the control grid snaps into place? And the way you do that is by all the things you do to snap the control grid in place. You don't say, oh, we're snapping a control grid in place because we want to take away your assets, we want to take away your freedoms, and we want you to be slaves. What you say is, oh, there's a problem, there's an invisible enemy, there's a healthcare crisis, and we need to do this and this and this and this and this, and everything we're doing is here to help you. So, this is a control bridge to get us from here to the complete controls. Once you have CBDCs, you don't need to bother with biowarfare. You don't need to bother with pandemics. You don't need to bother with, you don't need to poison people with injections. You've got complete control. So to me, what they're doing with healthcare, what they've done so far, and in the future, what they're planning on doing with pandemics and biodefense, is simply to get you to that point where they have installed that complete control system.
Now, what would you say to those who are hearing this and say, hey, I'm not really concerned. In Germany, for example, the 2G, 3G vaccine passport system has been lifted. There's really not any more mask mandates, just in a few locations, and lockdowns are really just a thing of the past. We have nothing to worry about. What do you say to those who hold that belief?
So when I was a government official and worked in Washington, you would see 2 things. You would see the Sunday talk shows in the news that said yakety, yakety, yak. And then you would watch the budgets and the rulemaking. And the way you understood what was going to happen in the future was by watching the money allocated and the rules and regulations, sending the money in certain ways and controlling the ways. So here we have the train tracks of control and resource allocation. And here we have entertainment, yakety, yakety, yak. And there's absolutely no connection. It's multiple personality disorder. These guys say we're going to Paris, and meantime, everything is being engineered. The train tracks are being engineered for the whole world to go to Rome. And so I don't watch the yakety yak. You know, I have to be aware of it because I do the Solari report. What I watch is where is the money being allocated to build the train tracks and where are those train tracks going to take us? And right now, if you look at all the preparation that is going in to doing a much bigger round of pandemic, a much bigger round of biowarfare and biodefense, a much bigger tsunami of healthcare rules and regulations to help the central banks control and manage inflation and demand destruction. You know, we're in the World Series of central control, and we just finished the second inning. And, you know, they're getting ready to double down in some very big ways. And a lot of sort of control points coming from something that doesn't look like it's the banker, and healthcare is working. It's been very successful. They spent decades building this. And if you look at the money, the tsunami of money that's going into biodefense and, you know, the next pandemic or the next cyber contagion, you know, there are other crises. We have Plan B and Plan C. So we have climate change. We have, you know, cyber, there are all sorts of different names. But, and part of it is as you centralize control, the more centralized you get, the more fragile the system gets. So there are significant problems. The biggest one, which 8 billion people want to be free. They don't want to be centrally controlled.
Based on your experience working for the U.S. government and based on your knowledge of the goals of these central planners, is it even reasonable to say that the response to COVID-19 was authentic, or perhaps is this the result of pre-planning?
This was pre-planned. This was it's completely ridiculous to assume that it wasn't. In other words, if you look at the documentation to prove that it was planned, particularly the financial aspects, it's impossible that it wasn't pre-planned. You know, it's anybody who's run a big operation knows how hard it is, how much work and planning it takes. This one took a lot of planning, and I worked for many years with investigative reporter John Rappaport on the effort to falsify a pandemic. You know, basically a pandemic is a false flag. You know, so they've been trying to do this many times, and this is not the first time. It's just the first time they succeeded globally. But the other thing, and I'll just be really blunt, and anybody who knows me can tell you, I was apoplectic in 1998, 99, 2000, 2001, 2002, because it was a fait accompli. If you stole all the retirement funds, you would have to reduce the population. You would have to reduce the population's economic footprint by radical amounts. It was inevitable. And every year you let that money sit stolen and not getting it back, you were locking yourself into a world where these kinds of things were inevitable. So it wasn't clear to me how they would do the reset, but the fact that they had to, you know, because they've been continuously lowering life expectancies from the time the coup started, you know, certainly in America. So I knew this was coming. I didn't know it would be a magic virus because they tried the magic virus trick many, many times, and, you know, it succeeded sometimes, but not on this scale. So I thought it was much more likely to be a war, but I think they were able to get the global pandemic to go. And, you know, I hate to say this, a lot of getting it to go, if you come to Solari and you do a search, put in mind control, and you'll get a commentary that has the best links we've ever been able to find on propaganda, mind control, mind manipulation. At the very bottom of those links are a series of lectures by Charles Morgan and Dr. James Giordano to the military on military-grade neurological weapons. And, you know, we've seen instances, for example, at the end of Iraq War, the neurological weapons apparently were used on the Iraqi soldiers. They sat down, they cried, they walked off. You know, there was discussion of this as a military weapon. But this is, I think, the first time we've seen an example of a phenomenal war on the general population using these kinds of neurological weapons. And it's it's part of what made the magic virus go. And I think the establishment is exceptionally pleased at how well this technology is working through the smartphones, through the digital systems, digital TV, and still many of the population cannot fathom the fact that they're the target of this kind of technology.
Sure. Now, I do have to ask you, how does the Ukraine war factor into all of this?
So I see the Ukraine war as being, the establishment is excellent at, they call it stacking functions. So whenever you have a major operation, it's not just about one thing. Because of the rise of Asia and the increased investment in the Silk Road, there is a tremendous desire to control geographically, the Eurasian landmass. And Ukraine is very strategically placed and has a huge amount of very valuable farmland and land. And I think there is an effort to clear the Ukraine out, basically depopulate the Ukraine and rebuild it as a hub on the Silk Road by a variety of parties. So I think that's part of it. But the other is I see the Ukraine as essentially a move to, by the Anglo-American alliance, to control the European market share and make sure that Germany and Russia don't come together, Europe and Asia don't come together and cut out the Anglo-American, sort of market share alliance power position, if you will. And if anything, what we're watching is not a war in Ukraine, but a war between the dollar syndicate and the euro syndicate, and the dollar syndicate moving a lot of the euro syndicate into the dollar. So it's almost as though the Western world is cannibalizing itself as the commodity producers stop allowing the control of the oil trade to support the Western currencies. You're really seeing a competition between the euro and the dollar for market share, and the euro is losing. This is really a war on Europe, if anything, and an assertion of control through NATO of Europe.
But what are the ways in which people can fight back and ensure that they maintain national and individual sovereignty?
If you go check out this article, I want to stop CBDCs, what can I do? I would strongly recommend it. And there's many ideas listed. And the most important thing is each person is unique. What you need to do is get yourself and your family out of the control grid. Until the last part of the corral snaps into place, get out of the paddock. So first use cash, bank local. Let's take this system analog as much as possible, get it rebalanced, digital and analog. But the other thing is you want to bring awareness. So taking your interview and spreading it out to your family and friends so that they just don't go with the flow and realize, this is convenient. No, it's not convenient, because it's leading you into a trap that you don't want to go to. So spread the word, because the more people who take it the other way are very helpful. Finally, you want to be as resilient as possible. Given how the world is changing and the economics are changing, it makes much more sense for a community to get together and do their own energy, for a community to get together and, nurture and grow their fresh food systems. Get as resilient as you can with your family, your friends, your community, your neighbors. Do it in a way, though, that's energizing for you. What you want to do is you want to stop financing your enemy and start financing the basic provisions you need. We're just about to publish, you haven't seen it yet, we'll publish next week our new theme for the annual wrap-up called Pharma Food. It's about synthetic food. And it's by a wonderful reporter here in the Netherlands, Elsa van Hamlin. And it's one of the most frightening things I've ever read. And if you haven't started to, I tell everybody, finance your local farmer, not because you want to make money, but because you don't want to eat insects. Right. So, if we want to have a human civilization and a world with fresh food, healthy food, good, clean energy, we're going to have to finance it and build it ourselves. It's time to go off and say, something? We're on our own, and, we need to rebuild everything, including a healthcare system that's safe and we can use. I can't speak to Germany, but I know in the United States what's the hospitals have become literally very dangerous places to go in many cases. So if we want health care, if we want education, if we want energy, if we want food, we're going to have to start building it and financing it ourselves.